Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30 on February 13th, 2025, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of Fitchburg's Transportation and Transit Commission. We have one member who is absent with excuse. That's Elizabeth. Everybody else is here virtually or in person. There's no members of the public, so we'll move to approval of the agenda. Before we have a motion, I just want to point out that when things run long or we finish up something early or something like that, it's a privileged motion to amend the agenda at any time. Okay. So people say, well, if it occurs to you later that you want to take something in a different order or something, just make a motion, and if it gets a second, we'll vote on it, and then we can continue from there. But how do you like the agenda tonight?
So can I make a motion that we put the items in number 7 in order of the most pressing first? Mm-hmm. However, I don't know which one would be the
Ross,
most pressing.
which would be the right order?
I would go 7A, Draft Vision Zero Resolution, then 7C, Future CIP items, then 7B, Transit Plan Update. So basically just moving 7B after 7C.
So I move to reorder the discussion items A, C, B.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I think Mike is muted, maybe not, but I
said aye.
Okay, I lip read the aye. Okay, so we'll do that. And next up is approval of minutes. So entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the January 9th minutes.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion, corrections? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that was also unanimous. Staff report?
Yeah, so I was asked to give a little bit of an update on federal funding. And I think as everyone here kind of already knows, federal funding is in a little bit of a state of flux at the moment where we're not 100% sure what we're going to get at any given time. So this is all kind of information as I know it right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it changes at a later date, unfortunately. So kind of broad overview, federal funds that have already been obligated to the state, like Wisconsin DOT, are generally considered to be secure. We get a lot of our federal money that way, where it passes through from the federal government to the state, and the state distributes it to the municipalities. any currently obligated or recommended transportation funding is likely secure. That seems like an area where there's been less changes. So if you want some more reading, there's a U.S. Department of Transportation order titled Ensuring Reliance Upon Sound Economic Analysis in Department of Transportation Policies, Programs, and Activities. I think Strong Towns put out a little article that referenced it, and that's how I found it. So that kind of outlines some of their new priorities.
That must end up being a catchy acronym, judging by the title. You know.
Try and pronounce it, I dare you.
No.
No. Just wondered.
Yeah, so I'll kind of get into some specifics on our transportation projects. I can, yeah.
I can see them, so that's why I was like, gee, those would be interesting to see on the screen.
There we go.
There we go.
So I've got the CIP numbers here for all these projects. I'm not gonna reference that because unless you're looking it up, it's not really relevant. But basically for Sain Road Phase 3, this is the Sain and McCoy intersection part of that project. We have 1.7 million in Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. That money was already obligated to WSDOT and is safe. I've talked with the grant administrator there, and she hasn't heard anything about, clawing back that money or anything like that. Irish Lane, that's a future project. In our CIP, there's $2.8 million of unspecified grant funding. That project is far enough out that I have not yet applied for any grant on that. So I would expect that far out, there may be impacts on like the amount of grant money available to be applied for from the federal government. So
when we do something like that, sorry to, because I know we're going to talk about CIPs, but when you put, for example, $2.8 million, is there a formula you use to come up with that number as a component of the CIP?
It varies. Sometimes we might have like a specific grant in mind and we say, oh, that's usually a 50-50 match or a 70-30 match, and we'll put that in there. Sometimes it's, I have $10 million worth of other projects in this year and I can only probably do $12 million worth of projects, so anything over that $2 million needs to be grant funded.
Okay.
So then it's kind of
Solving
more hopeful. Yeah. Okay. Where maybe we don't get as much grant funding and we push it to a different year that has more funding available.
Yeah.
So. County Highway bike and pedestrian underpass, about 400,000, a little bit more in TAP funding. TAP funding is one of those federal pass-throughs to the state. That's already obligated to WSDOT, so that's safe. And then the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. So that's basically part of our Vision Zero that we'll talk about in a minute. There's $240,000 in Safe Streets for All grant funding. That is a federal pass-through to the MPO. My thought is that's likely safe. There's still some agreements that need to be signed there. We've been awarded the money, but I am not sure on the status of the agreements between the MPO and the federal government. So, but since it's street safety funding, my thought is that it will be safe. And then kind of the big one here, bus rapid transit. So the Fitchburg portion of this project is about $13.5 million in federal funding and $1.5 million in Fitchburg funding. The total project going all the way up through Madison for north-south is $118 million in federal funding. This funding has been recommended by a congressional committee, but not approved. So it will need to be approved in the federal budget. The next deadline, as far as I am aware, for the federal budget is March 14th. That's where they either need to pass a budget or do some kind of stopgap measure. And then if we do end up seeing a lack of funding on this project, depending on the severity, basically Madison and Fitchburg staff's thoughts are to delay the project by whatever amount of time we think could fix that funding gap, instead of doing half of the project or something like that. So, I guess questions on that before I move on to non-federal funding related stuff?
In the BRT project, which is 3519, there's $1.5 million in 2025. So that's in this current year's capital plan.
Yep.
What's that specifically for?
So that is for construction of stations.
Okay.
So that's the Fitchburg match to the federal small starts grant.
Okay, which is separate from this federal funding?
The small starts grant is this federal funding.
It is, okay.
And the Fitchburg match is, we have that $1.5 million to spend, but obviously
We're obligated even though construction isn't gonna really start.
Right, exactly. It had to be obligated in the 2025 budget as a requirement of that small starts grant. And will basically be, departments can carry over budget money from year to year if it's unused. So we will basically have to roll that money over each year until construction starts.
Okay. In practice, disregarding the uncertainty here, did we expect to spend the 1.5 million in 2025?
No.
Okay, so it's there because it needed to be placed into our budget, but we also didn't expect to be spending it in this year.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Not part of our cash flow.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have a couple of things. I attended last week a National Bike League webinar on the uncertainties of federal funding for bicycle and pedestrians, and less was known then than even this week. Today, I listened to one from the Rails to Trails Consortium focused on mostly trails and TAP, transportation alternatives. And they spent about 2/3 of it talking about how to get your projects through and get them still funded. And some of the things that Sean Duffy, former Wisconsin congressman who is now US DOT secretary, is saying is, first of all, he's all in for safety, apparently, his words, and also families and children. And so those are things that we want to be emphasizing, quality of life, and stay away from equity and those kinds of things that we care about very much around here, but we're not putting them into federal grants these days because it's poison. Second item of information is I got this afternoon I got a email from the Vision Zero Network. That's a nonprofit that's funded by the National Safety Council with federal funds. Last week they got a stop work order, but this week they got a resume work order. So they're back in business, supporting communities around the country and states and counties who are doing Vision Zero. And I think it's a result of this Duffy preference for safety projects. And then their other advice was, wherever your project is, if it's not obligated, get the contract signed. So there's these two simultaneous steps of getting your contract signed and getting a grant officer assigned to your project by Federal Highways or whoever the funding agency is, US DOT. So that advice, so that would be, our advice to the MPO. Now, they don't need us to tell them that. Everybody knows this. But so that our MPO will be working hard trying to get that safety grant nailed down and get a grant officer assigned and all the agreements signed.
When you refer to contracts, are you referring to contracts with the companies that would be performing construction?
No, there's a contract that comes between the grantee, which is the MPO or us or whomever, and the grantor, which could be Federal Highways or it could be WSDOT or whoever.
Okay.
But that's the contract that you want signed. You can go out and then hire your contractors and build your road or whatever it is, and then ask for, but signing that contract is what protects you from spurious hiccups in getting your funding.
So at this point, no one's aware of a situation where a signed contract has been paused?
No one's aware of anything because it's just like so early in this process.
So the one news item I would point to is that I haven't done a ton of extra research into this, so if it's, changed or whatever now, whatever. But I believe it was the state of New York had money that was already in their accounts taken back. And I think that was FEMA-related funding, but I'm not 100% sure.
New York is a special target.
Yeah, and that had to do with...
It's the Milwaukee of the United States.
Yes, it is. For example, they're targeting the congestion pricing now 4 or 6 months after it's went live.
Yeah, I think I heard what you heard also, so.
Yeah.
On to the next step, the next topic.
Okay. This is just more of a general kind of staff update. Some of the meetings that I attended last month in between meetings with outside agencies, met with Dane County for the Rimrock Road resurfacing. That is a project that has federal funding. Rimrock is a county highway, but we're obviously involved since it's within our borders. Went to the Safe Streets for All grant kickoff, where we did talk about, this was 3 weeks ago now, so we were very unsure about any funding at that time. Met with the MPO Technical Advisory Committee, and we kind of redid some of the committee rules and bylaws, I guess you'd call them. And then had a meeting with Metro Transit about slight route adjustments on Fitchburg Road. Basically, there's a possibility that the E line, which is not in Fitchburg right now, it kind of comes in on McKee west of Fitchburg. There's a possibility that might come in down McKee to Fitchburg and turn around at the Nesbitt roundabout and then kind of go back out the way it came. So I guess a little bit of connectivity to target the target area from the west.
So that was initiated by them, or were we asking?
That was initiated by Metro. There's a few other route changes that they're kind of spurring, and this one may have needed some adjustments, some physical adjustments to Fitchburg, but I think we've figured out a way that we don't need to. So that's why we had a bigger meeting about it, because we might have had to do some actual physical work. And then as far as internal meetings for our projects, Basswood Drive, we held a kickoff meeting. That's over by Sub-Zero, if you know where that is. That's just a small cul-de-sac, nothing too big there. Bryant Road, which is up by Zimbrick off of Fish Hatchery Road. We're gonna try to resurface that and make it as pedestrian friendly as we can. But there's a lot of asphalt on both sides there. So we're meeting with Zimbrick and the other two businesses on Bryant Road later this week or next week to kind of make sure we're taking all the stakeholders into account. And then been meeting with a lot of departments in City Hall for the upcoming parking lot resurfacing. I think the only thing this commission would be concerned with is we're gonna stripe a couple more crosswalks in the City Hall parking lot, but it's a lot of coordination to make sure the senior center and the library have enough parking while we're ripping stuff up. And then upcoming, our annual street resurfacing project, we'll be holding a public information meeting for that. So, questions there?
What happened at your Basswood Drive kickoff? They just said, sorry, no meetings necessary, we're taking care of it ourselves?
More or less. I mean, they're gonna basically, so Sub-Zero has an engineer that will be doing the design, and then we'll approve it basically, and we have to coordinate with our resurfacing of the rest of Basswood Drive outside of the cul-de-sac.
So Basswood right now is a public street and it goes into Bud's, which is private.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the places in the city where, like the AMC Theater driveways, where a private street looks like a public street because the sidewalk doesn't run across it. So that will be fixed.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically right now it's a T intersection with Basswood and Bud's Drive. It's gonna turn into a cul-de-sac with, standard concrete driveway aprons, and the sidewalk will go across the opening, so it will not look like a city street.
Very good.
So you can no longer get onto Basswood from Commerce Drive?
You can. You will
Well,
still.
where is the cul-de-sac gonna be?
Let me open up a map.
Is it to prevent people from getting onto Basswood or getting onto Bud's?
It's not to prevent people from getting anywhere, it's to make sure the public is not confused. So,
Switch screens.
technology.
We'd love to hate it.
So right now, this section that Google says is Basswood Drive is a private driveway. And Bud's Drive is private. So Basswood Drive will have a cul-de-sac right here, where this intersection currently is.
Okay.
And it will have 3 driveways coming off of it, and 1
All right.
regular city street.
So the part that's to the west of Bud's is still a public street.
Correct.
There's access to those other 2 businesses there.
Can we change the name of the cul-de-sac to Gulf of Sub-Zero?
I was surprised on Google Maps to see today that the extension of Research Park Drive east of Woods Hollow Drive is now shown on Google Maps. There's a driveway that goes through the Promega campus and connects to the roundabout over by Grace. And Google Maps is now calling that all Research Park Drive.
Still Fayette Glen.
Well, no,
That's a private. That's a
Research
private
Park Drive ends at the roundabout.
Yeah.
And
There's a
it
lot
becomes-
of areas like that. Where
Yeah, so that's just an error on
Yeah.
Google Maps part,
Yeah.
or a liberty, I should say, that they took.
Ross, for a rimrock, is that just resurface? I guess I should say that. Is it limited to resurfacing, or will there be other improvements coinciding with that?
So we will be upgrading some sidewalk ramps, crosswalks, and bus stations. So currently there's some bus stops on Rimrock that don't have a bus pad or sidewalk leading up to them. So we'll be basically putting in a bus pad and then sidewalk up to the closest point where you can either cross the road to get to the rest of the sidewalk or continue on.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
There's somebody who rides a 65 and she gets off right around Maloney and Rimrock there too, and on a day like this just gets dumped right into a snowbank with no curb just on the side of the street. And crossing Rimrock on a good day is treacherous, so I'm glad to hear that there's some improvements being made in that lens as well.
I had a conversation on email last year with the county, and I'm also understanding that the bike lanes will be striped as buffered.
Yes, they're narrowing the two-way left turn lane in the center to get more room for buffered bike lanes.
And that will change that street by the definition of city ratings from a high stress to a low stress, because 35 miles an hour in buffered bike lanes is okay.
I think that's optimistic, but
Talking about the rating, not
Yeah.
not what people feel about it.
stressed.
I'll probably continue to cut down Engelhart.
So that's my staff report.
I have just a request for the next staff report is that it would be, I think, good if you can update us on quiet zones on our railroad crossings.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Anything else on the staff? Questions for staff? All right then. Any reports from the Common Council, Bill or Gabriella?
Yeah, so as you gleaned by reading tonight's agenda, the mayor is putting together priorities for 2025 in preparation for CIP and budget seasons. So we'll be talking about these CIP projects later. Of interest to the TTC is that the fourth addition to Terra Bessa is proceeding along. There was another resolution passed to let, in the northeast side, we'll have some more development there with 28 buildable lots at bordering Larson Road, so it's right at the city boundary. All residential, though it is T4, which would allow mixed use. Regarding stormwater, which is certainly affected by the presence of roads everywhere and parking lots, our total maximum daily load, the amount of total suspended solids and phosphorus that we're allowed to be putting into the water systems in order to keep things within EPA limits. We are in compliance in one of 3 watersheds, and based on what our stormwater engineer has said, it would cost us about $35 million to get in compliance. So I guess.
Which watershed? The big one, I hope.
Well, now I don't remember, but.
Okay.
I know Rock River is one that we are, I believe, not in compliance with, because that one is.
So that would be Nine Springs.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know about the other 2.
And Badger Mill and Storytown Creek, I guess, is our 3rd watershed.
Well, Lake Winger is one of them. And it's just
That's Rock River though.
Okay. Mayor Julia and City Administrator Chad participated in a Dane County Cities and Villages Association roundtable discussion on operating referenda. Madison, Monona, Middleton, and Fitchburg had representation there. If you look them up on YouTube, you can find it and watch that meeting. It's probably worth your time. Our very own Scott Yarbrough was one of 4 employees to receive an Employee Recognition Award, voted by their peers as being excellent in their field. There was a CSM, certified survey map, to allow 2 multifamily buildings to proceed. This is on the north side of Haight Road, just across the street from Hartung Fields. So that just to the east of that roundabout with Lacey and Haight Farm Road. The inspiration at Swan Creek, that's the 57 small lot single family homes that is on hold just a little bit, waiting for MG&E to get some utility work done, and that will happen at some point in the spring before development continues on that. We should be all aware that phases 2 and 3 of Syene will be happening this year, so everything from 200 feet north of Sherrill Drive up through the intersection with McCoy. As part of that, the Capital City Trail parking lot on the west side of Syene Road there that is currently packed gravel, that will be paved. Apropos to today, we've got our snow and ice controls policies available on the city's website, Fitchburg.wi.gov, Government, Public Works, Streets and Transportation, Snow Removal, then scroll down till you find the link. You can find all of the policies there. Also apropos, we at Public Works and Finance approved the outfitting of our 3 new snowplow chassis that we had previously purchased. Dark sky ordinance passed on Tuesday, so you can read soon enough, I guess, in our code or in our ordinances what that's about.
Is everything that already exists grandfathered, or
Yes, pretty much.
nothing affects?
Yeah, anything new that goes through the architectural design review process will have to include lighting that is compliant.
Okay.
There's a list of maybe a dozen exceptions. The biggest one is single family and 2-family homes. But there's also things like, street lights and temporary lighting for cleaning up a car crash that happens at night, that kind of thing.
Construction.
And a couple of parks things. Tower Hill Shelters is being redone this summer. McKee Farms Park shelters are getting new siding, and we'll have 4 more pickleball courts in McGaw Park. 4. Yes. Well, there's 8 there now, and there will be 4 just off to the east, and that might be about all that could fit there. But there's also, obviously, it costs money to do that.
Yeah, right.
Which is why there won't be any lighting there. So almost the entirety of the lighting budget was used just to get the pickleball courts done.
It's very dark sky compliant.
Yes.
Everything else is lit in McGaw, but not the pickleball courts.
Well, for the nearby homeowners, that might be a benefit.
Unless they play pickleball.
Well, pickleball is a summer sport, so
We are putting in, I believe, pilings though, to add.
there will be footings there, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it can be added later.
Conduit, yep.
They won't have to rip up things to make it happen, so.
Gabriella.
Yeah, circling back to the TMDL.
I'm sorry.
I can do a quick bike and
Bike and
Oh,
ped.
back then.
Yep, we'll do them in order.
Yeah, basically, I was not at this meeting, but I got a rundown from Phil. They reviewed the 2025 priorities for the commission. They got an update on B-cycle expansion for this year. Phil gave them an update that I had written about just public works projects and basically what I had read about funding. Except for that it was like 2 weeks old, 2 weeks younger, so I knew even less. They talked about the March 14th working session for the bike and ped plan update. They're gonna try to do a committee of the whole presentation at some point. I'm not sure when. I'm sure that schedule is pretty full. And then they had a discussion on walking priorities. So, yeah.
Thank you. Gabriella.
I checked my TMDL notes, and we are in compliance in Swan Creek, and we are non-compliance in Lake Wingra and Nine Springs Creek, which are the 3
What was the
watersheds.
last one?
Nine Springs Creek.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 watersheds that are monitored, but we're part of the Rock River as a whole.
Okay.
And then Plan Commission, Bill covered a couple of things, but we did look at ADRs, at architectural design reviews for 3 of the businesses that are along McKee Road off of Petrona. The Jamestown Chase Bank, the Jamestown McDonald's, and just those 2. I'm sorry, just those two buildings, the McDonald's and the Chase Bank. The Chick-fil-A has been postponed, and there's one other building that has not come forward for an architectural design review.
Car wash.
The car wash, yeah.
Hope they have good bike parking.
They believe they. Let me see. There is a lot of parking. That's one of the things. And they're going to. I didn't specifically talk about parking, but we asked about bike parking, and I don't have a note here about it.
These are all close to the intersection of McKee and Fitchburg.
Correct.
They're
It's
front
on the west
McKee.
side there.
They're the four buildings in front of
Northwest
McKee.
quadrant.
There is bike parking at the Chase Bank for sure. I have that on my notes. And then staff did a kind of an overview of the year. They worked, the sustainability plan draft is complete, so we're looking on the signing action items, and then they'll bring it to the council for approval once they have kind of more of a specific action plan. The neighborhood plans are still in the works. They anticipate finishing probably in the summertime. It was hoped to finish earlier in the year, but I think it's not looking at it till like August or so. The planning team reviewed 66 applications and 41 agenda items, and they processed over 540 applications. Not the most in a year, but pretty close. They've done a ton of stuff this year. It's just including update to the business highway zoning, 10 minor comp plan amendments, the teen center study, finalized the parks and open space plan, updated and next year they're planning to have a strategic plan for the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, complete the bike and ped plan, complete those neighborhood plans, potential to do some minor zoning changes in anticipation of doing a major zoning update, which won't be able to be done in the next year. Hopefully we'll get started with an RFP. And then, they will be putting up an RFP for a comp plan update and a zoning ordinance update. I don't know if they're gonna be separate or if there'll be one. I am not clear on that, but both of those are forthcoming, and that's a priority for the mayor as well.
So there would be changes to the existing zoning code, but not a comprehensive zoning rewrite.
So they'll probably do some small changes, because it's a zoning code rewrite just takes so long.
Yeah.
And there's some things that are holding projects back that are regularly issues. So I think they might do some piecemeal, like for example, the business highway needed an update. Mm-hmm. So we did that this year or this past year. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of functionally want to get some things done, but practically it's just going to take time.
And when we had discussions in here about parking and parking ratios to residential units or business size, is that something that they would now think about doing within the small changes to existing zoning code, or defer any parking changes to comprehensive?
So the parking is at the design review phase and not at the zoning, is my
It's not in
understanding.
the ordinances either.
So,
It's not, okay.
yeah,
And they removed it from the policies at my request.
Yeah,
They said
so-
that the one that I found on the city website was obsolete,
Okay,
and Deanna removed it. And the development guide that references it and links to it, she doesn't have the source for that document, but she was able to blank out the reference in the table of contents and on that page. So there's a big blank place where there used to be a reference to parking standards. And she removed the parking standards from the website.
okay.
So I submitted Fitchburg to the Parking Reform Network as a city which had removed all of its parking minimums.
Yeah.
And I got some correspondence back saying that, well, we found this one, we apparently require 1.5 spaces per unit in trailer parks. So I have not yet gotten to Deanna, it's in the trailer park chapter. So
wow,
I
there.
haven't gotten back to Deanna to request that be amended to remove that requirement, because I'm sure we're not gonna have any more trailer parks.
There's some Googling experts right there, wow.
Bigger issues with our trailer park.
Yeah.
Not enough parking is not what is
Not the-
bothering us down there.
So, yeah.
Gabriella,
Yeah.
with the zoning reform, is there any thought that we would try and make enough changes that fewer projects need to go to PDD?
Yes, but that's not as much of a problem, I don't think. It's not like Middleton. I don't know if you read about Middleton zoning update, but like everything in Middleton was a PDD. Everything, because they didn't have a zoning code, was completely unusable. But, so we're not in that type of shape, but I think it's just, our zoning code hasn't been updated in like, I don't know, at least 30 years.
Except for the smart code.
Yeah.
And the smart code
except for
requires
smart
minimum areas, and that's why we get so many PDDs that are very smart code-ish, like Hartung Fields, because it's not big enough. And therefore it doesn't meet the standards for having the transportation network that you need in a smart code neighborhood and stuff like that.
I think it's ultimately making sure that things that we want in the city can be by right in the zoning,
Right.
so we're not having to constantly make changes and updating things. So not necessarily something that would push it to a PDD, but we should just make it more facilitate the type of development we want. Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussion about that as we get closer.
Some of the things that I've seen are eliminate single-family zoning. These are policy initiatives. Eliminate minimum lot sizes and allow ADUs by right.
Yeah, I think that's something we may do in the near term before the zoning code update. But yes, things like that. I don't know what it will look like though exactly.
Any questions for any of our reporters? Thank you all. All right, next up is our Vision Zero update. Ross gave us the previous version and an updated version, which have dates on them.
Yeah, they're in the 12.5 is the old version, obviously, and the 2.13 is the new version. Basically, just very, very general summary of the changes. I combined some whereas clauses that were, in my mind, had similar meaning to just remove the whereas in between the sentences. And then changed a little bit of wording to make staff more comfortable with what this says. And there were some basically typo errors in the first version, like doubling of one of the whereas clauses, stuff like that. So it's really not, no major changes in the second version.
Any feedback for Ross on these? Or any more explanation?
I think like what I'm generally looking for here is like substantive changes that would be necessary before referring this from council to the various related commissions. So this is still in a draft phase. It's not.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
We're not actually passing anything tonight.
Well, I took the document and I made a lot of edits with track changes on in Word, but so we could talk about each of those. But one of the things that more generally that I wanted to explore was, at the moment, this particular document doesn't actually refer to anything in terms of what Vision Zero is, like the entity Vision Zero. It says the words Vision Zero, but if suddenly all of what was out there in internet land ceased to exist, it would be kind of a curious phrase that didn't refer to anything other than something that it would look like we made up. And I realized that something called Vision Zero does exist out there, but one of my questions was whether it's necessary to call this Vision Zero, or if what we're trying to achieve in terms of improving safety and roadway design could be accomplished in a resolution without a reference to Vision Zero. Like, is it necessary to call it that? Does that help us in any way? Or is it simply that that is a national thing that exists out there that we're taking cues from to write this resolution?
I think it does help us to call it Vision Zero because it's easier to use all of the existing literature about Vision Zero that the Vision Zero boards have written.
The pillars.
Yep. And when this goes out for actual referral and voting, I'll include more background material that, explains what Vision Zero actually is.
Okay.
So this is just, this is just the resolution, and then in previous packets, we've had, a bunch of the supporting materials.
All of the supporting materials were there before, but now they're gone, so that's why it points to something that might or might not be out there and might or might not change as being like a thing we're relying on in writing this, which could be different in 5 years. That's why I just wasn't sure how much we wanted to hook our selves to a thing called Vision Zero that's out there outside of something in the resolution.
I had a long resolution, and I was advised to make it shorter.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed a lot of stuff out of it and made it into what looks like a staff memo, although it was a big Fitchburg memo. Not everything has to be in the resolution. And I do think that, I agree with Ross, it's very valuable to hitch to this wagon because it's recognized by DOT and WSDOT. It's got a national nonprofit that's funded by the National Safety Council that I already mentioned that provides technical support. It's something that people are looking for when they're saying, is this community taking safety seriously? So I think it's wise to not invent our own terminology and things like that.
And one minor point of clarification, this is an international thing. It came out of Sweden originally, right?
Sweden.
Yeah.
Understood, yeah. I'm just, it's still temporal. If this resolution was in front of us in 2005, before Vision Zero, maybe that wasn't before it was, but it would make no sense because it was speaking to something that didn't exist. And in 2050, it might not exist. I can't tell. So I'm just saying that it points to something out there that is currently in existence, but not necessarily forever.
I think the first few clauses define it, in my mind, define it pretty clearly. Like we define it within the resolution itself, I think, in a way that clarifies what it means.
Okay.
In my mind, just those, not the first whereas, but the three version. Vision Zero is the concept of traffic deaths, blah, blah, blah. Vision Zero supports a paradigm shift by designing streets, blah, blah, blah. Vision Zero recognizes that people will sometimes make mistakes and so on. So I feel like there is an internal logic to what Vision Zero is in the resolution. I think if I read this without knowing anything about Vision Zero, I think I would understand what it was getting at, even though I didn't understand that it was part of a larger movement. I think I would, it defines it within, in my mind, it defines it within the clauses.
Okay. And in the resolved clause, we do have adopts the goal of eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries, which is, the 10-word summary of Vision Zero, I think.
So while we're in the be it resolved clause here, I believe we've talked about this at one earlier meeting about an effective date. Now we say in here by a future year to be determined by the upcoming comprehensive safety action plan. Does that not have a, let's say, eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2030 or 35? Does that, if we move forward with this now, are we getting all the benefits we could out of being affiliated, kind of with the Vision Zero movement, i.e. funding or grants or some of the other recognition that's out there? Or is that this is the first step we have to take, and then once we get to setting a date as part of the comprehensive safety action plan, then we can kind of be full members, if you will, which is not an accurate way of describing it, but the first closest thing that came to my mind.
The second thing you said. Basically, in terms of the Safe Streets for All grant program, we have to have a comprehensive safety action plan before we are eligible for the implementation and demonstration Safe Streets for All grants, which is a huge source of money for Vision Zero implementation. So you need the action plan, and then you can do the implementation grants.
Grant application.
Yep.
And given the timeline for the safety action plan, it would be better for us to do this Vision Zero ordinance first.
Generally, the order that, I'm blanking on the Change Lab Solutions, recommends for Vision Zero implementation is you pass your Vision Zero resolution that generally does have a date that says we will eliminate traffic deaths by 2030 or whatever it is. And then you create your comprehensive safety action plan, and then you start implementing the safety action plan. We don't have a date in here because in some staff's mind, that obligates us to spend the money to do it. And we have no idea how much money this is gonna cost until we have the comprehensive safety action plan. So this resolution without a date is basically a compromise between doing things in the order that is recommended by Change Lab Solutions and making it so we're not obligating ourselves to spending an unknown amount of money.
To that point though, could we put, if we really wanted to be cheeky about it, could we put like by the year 9,999 as a placeholder? And then, I don't know if that would make much of a difference. I mean,
I think I would get more questions at council about that than I will with this wording.
It would be like the 400-year education.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I agree with Ross that the reason that there is no date in here is because of local reluctance. That the standard way to do it is to say, we are going to aim high and this is our goal, and then you try to come up with a safety action plan that meets that goal. And therefore, I favor, and I have it here, from take out a future year to be determined blah, blah, blah policy and put in 2030. And I think that that is a reasonable thing to do because we know that it's a statistical thing. We're trying to push down the probability of these serious crashes. We want them to be zero. One of the ways of doing that is separating different modes and speeds and time and space. And we won't be able to do all of that by 2030. Make sure there are sidewalks everywhere, that there are crossing signals everywhere, that there are separated rail crossings throughout our rail line. We know that that's not going to happen. And we're not promising in this resolution to spend all the money that it takes to do that, to not have the possibility of ever a human being get in contact with a high energy moving inanimate object. So I say, let's put in the date. And I ask our council members here to do that when this comes to council. Because I think that we should aim high and we should express councils, if the council is willing, express our seriousness to go down this road in the resolution instead of put in weasel words. So that's my thought.
Is 2030 a realistic year?
Well, we haven't had any deaths for a year. And so we're 1/5 of the way to Hoboken's 5 years. So, or Jersey City, I always get them mixed up. But, what we don't want to do is have any of these things, and we should be looking at our network of where the riskiest places are and trying to fix them. And, if we do have a death after 2030 or a serious injury, that will be terrible, but it shouldn't be for lack of trying. So,
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask the same sort of a thing. If we put a date in there, it ought to be a reasonable date when we think we can actually achieve the goal, right? And so if we're unsure of, federal funding for the next 4 years, if we're unsure of how much money we're gonna be able to set aside to actually do any grade separated, multimodal things, or lower enough speed limits, get enough signs out there, et cetera. Should we bother putting it in if we don't feel like it's a realistic goal? I mean, I'm all for, yes, let's make a good effort, but if we say we want to eliminate by a particular date, I feel like it ought to be within reach.
I think it's the difference between aspirations and like practicality, right? It's like,
Exactly.
are we like saying we're gonna do this and gonna do it? Or are we saying we want to do this, we aim for this? Because if like we're actually doing it, then you do have to invest. Like, it's like, you have to, otherwise, and aspirations is fine. Like, it's okay to put an aspirational goal into something, but there is a difference.
What I don't want to happen is for us to pass a resolution with a date, and then it basically sits on a shelf like so many other plans that the city has that are not followed,
I think Ross would agree that what the Change Lab is suggesting is that your Vision Zero resolution should set the goal for the safety action plan. And what this does is it kicks that goal down the road to the safety action plan.
Yes.
And so that's why I think that it's useful to have the goal here.
Okay.
But
To ensure that the safety action plan actually
that safety
happens.
action plan should be an aggressive effort. And, it's going to be limited financially, of course. But, the reason that they ask you to set a deadline is so that you will light a fire under yourself and get to work on it. So, and saying that, we'll figure out later what our goal is, does not do that.
So in the state of Wisconsin, Madison and Milwaukee have Vision Zero resolutions, correct?
And Sun Prairie.
Sun Prairie, okay. And what can we learn from them in terms of timeline and level of effort?
Well, they put in a safety action plan. I don't know about Milwaukee. I've seen some of their facilities when I was there, and they're amazing. Separated bike lanes and high visibility crosswalks and stuff. But I don't know exactly what went into it. But I do know more about Madison, and so there is a cross-disciplinary coordinating team that's working on it, and it's resulted in a lot of separated bike lanes like Wilson Street and Hammersley. It's resulted in the pilot project to lower neighborhood speed limits to 20 miles per hour, and now the blanket citywide neighborhood speed limit of 20 miles per hour. And those are some of the examples. And they have a web page with lots of sub-pages that say what they're doing.
So Madison, Vision Zero Madison aims to eliminate traffic fatalities, blah, 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 by 2035. And they started in 2020, so they gave themselves 15 years.
Well, we're 1/8 their size, so.
Right? So we should be able to do it in 2 years.
And Milwaukee is 2037. I'm not sure when they start, when they started. But obviously, we're much smaller than 1/8 the size of Milwaukee.
Yes.
So what, to kind of put this a little bit in perspective in timeline, what do we expect, or when do we expect the comprehensive safety action plan to potentially be done? Just as far as, is this a 25 project, or is this a 2029, and we're setting it, hypothetically a 2030 date?
The plan should be completed in 2026.
Okay.
So we get the money, if all goes to plan, third quarter of 2025, and then basically create the plan over the course of 2026, and then it'll be done sometime in
And
2026.
that comprehensive safety action plan enables us to apply for Safe Streets for All implementation grants. And so that is a source of funding that all of this is designed to unlock.
Wait, so I'm sorry, did we know Sun Prairie's date? Or we don't know?
No, I haven't looked.
I'm curious what they did.
I have a very niggling small thing in the second whereas, Ross, where it says it is a holistic strategy. I think that we should have a semicolon after unacceptable, because the entire whereas section is one sentence, and that breaks it off.
Sounds good.
Well,
As long as we're being pedantic here.
I have a significant number of edits, but I don't know if it's a good use of time. I mean, I can read everything that I have edited in here, or I can send it to you.
Any controversial policy type things?
They're just small.
Yeah.
All right, let me just skim through these real quick. So the first whereas, it says, whereas the health and safety, I got rid of welfare, because I don't think that welfare is necessary for Vision Zero policy. I think it's health and safety. And rather than it being our utmost priority, I changed it to a civic priority and continued that no one should die or be seriously injured. I changed the concept of Vision Zero, rather than Vision Zero is the concept, is a recognized strategy rather than holistic, aimed at eliminating all traffic deaths and fatalities and severe injuries. Again, I got rid of increasing safe mobility. I get rid of healthy and equitable for all, as you mentioned earlier about equitable. And the next whereas, I got rid of all streets and transportation systems, blah, blah, blah. I just said, whereas Vision Zero supports an approach aimed at designing streets and transportation systems to move all people. So I got rid of the whole sort of soapboxy
Paradigm shift.
Designed to cars in mind, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that we have to say that. So I was just trying to be pragmatic about what was actually in here. In the next whereas, I got rid of, so Vision Zero recognizes that people will sometimes make mistakes. So the road system and related policies should be designed to reduce the likelihood that those inevitable mistakes, rather than ensure that. I don't know that we can ensure that. And then policymakers I got rid of expected and I changed it to encouraged to improve the roadway environment policies and other related systems. So I was just softening it and making it a little bit more pragmatic in a number of places. I guess that, this stands at a point in time where it says the next whereas 11 people in the city of Fitchburg lost their lives to traffic deaths between 2013 and 2024. But I don't know if that's necessary to include in the resolution. So it's there. I got rid of the part, and traffic crashes are among the leading cause of death in the United States. Because again, this stands at a point in time. On the next whereas, I wrote, City of Fitchburg's transportation infrastructure serves vulnerable road users rather than increasing number of. I mean, that may be true, but it serves vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and bicycles.
I think that indicates though that more pedestrians and more people are choosing to walk and bike than before. And that's what's implied.
More important.
We may feel that that's true, but is it true? Like, in other words, is
Yes.
there data that supports that?
There is,
Are we
yes.
pointing to that somewhere? And is that, okay. Nothing really with the next whereas, the whereas after that. Sometimes my mouse wants to scroll better than others.
Well, you're looking that over. Just want to say what my philosophy is about these kind of resolutions after being an elected for a long time. My focus is on what the be it therefore resolved clause says.
Okay.
And what we want the council to tell the staff and the mayor to do.
Yep.
And so we got to get that right. And then all the stuff up above, I consider to be education to get whatever it takes to get the council and the mayor to sign off on this resolution so that that whereas comes, or that.
Because it's not the direction, it's just.
It's justification for the.
Right. And so if someone says, like, there's a word there that's gonna be a trigger point for somebody, let's get it out of there, because we don't want them triggered. Is there something there that will help make somebody feel warm and fuzzy about this? Why, yes, let's keep that in there. So that's my philosophy, is working through these kind of micro edits.
Yep. Okay.
And I would be happy for you to subcommittee that with Ross if you like.
Okay, I'll send it over a copy.
I don't want to stop the discussion if other people want to discuss it, but.
I just will say, I don't mind, I know you soften some, and I think some of your edits seem legitimate, like, you know, I can't remember, one of the early ones you mentioned, the welfare, it's hard for us to ensure that. But I think the flowery language is okay, like, it kind of seems like paradigm shift, like, I guess it's kind of dramatic to say that, but in some ways,
It'll always.
This
is big.
I think it is big, and I remember when I wasn't here when we first started this conversation. I wasn't on the committee. I was off the committee for like 6 months or so, and then I got appointed by plan to come back. And so I hadn't talked about it at all. And so my first discussion about it, it was kind of like, oh, it was kind of powerful. It was like, oh, people don't have to die. Like, and that sounds crazy to say that, but like I really had just never really considered that. You kind of just are like, oh, that's just something that has to happen. It's like, no, we can say, no, that doesn't have to happen. And I think that's pretty powerful. And I do think it's something, it's almost like a paradigm shift, because it's like, nope, we don't have to accept that. And that's what I love about the concept, and why I do kind of like some of the flowery language.
Well, and even,
Personally.
you know, some of the, like, you know, telling us how many people have died, and reminding people that streets and transportation systems have been designed with cars in mind. I mean, we're like fish in water, and if you don't say something like that, people won't even, it won't be brought to their mind unless you remind them of it, you know?
Yeah, and I was a little bit felt dubious on that particular statement, because I don't think that Ross, as a traffic engineer, designs them only with cars in mind.
No, but the average person
Yes.
drives everywhere. Like, there is probably not a single household that is car-free by choice in the city of Fitchburg.
Okay.
We've got people here, we've got the places they want to go there,
Okay.
right? So everybody drives everywhere, pretty much. And for those people to think, oh, there's an alternative to this? What are you talking about? Of course streets have been designed for cars. What else would they be designed for? We're trying to tell them, hey, it doesn't have to be just for cars. We can do things differently and better.
I don't know, that my thinking has changed a lot in the last 5 years being on council. In part because of you two and your aggressive bike advocacy, which I appreciate. Like, I'm just like, it made me think about things differently. And I hadn't thought through it in that way before, and I appreciated that it was like, it was push, and I liked it. I was like,
I'll tell you, one of the reasons I'm such a strong bike advocate is because everything in the city is so far apart that walking is impossible.
yeah.
You know, if the city were designed better, I would be much more of a pedestrian advocate than a bike advocate, because I could get everywhere I wanted on foot.
Yeah, I was in DC, Washington DC over the weekend, and it's really nice to walk.
Yeah.
It's really nice to be able to walk to where you want to go. It's like lovely.
15-minute city.
So then let me ask you this question about the resolution part, because it says by adopting a Vision Zero policy. But I don't think that this document points to a policy. It just says that we're adopting.
So the Change Lab had a draft policy
Yes.
that you remember,
Yes.
and we are not ready to put that out yet. That will be part of the safety action plan.
I think I made a suggestion, I sent it to you, Ross, but the current version, it combined into one clause. But I think it actually should be separated out to two of the clauses that were in the original version, where it kind of think it brings up what you brought up. It's like the clause talks about that you separate out, be it further resolved by the Fitchburg Common Council will adopt a Vision Zero policy upon the completion of the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. Like that is the
Which
final
was
clause.
important enough to say twice last time.
Yeah. So that's like the final clause, and then the one before it talks about that we're having an action plan, and Vision Zero is the holistic approach to achieving that goal.
Yeah.
So I would
Are you saying
split
that
those
it's
two.
consecutive? Are you saying that the resolution says that a Vision Zero policy should be adopted following the completion of the comprehensive?
Yes.
That's what
That's
yeah.
almost word for word what the
Yeah.
first version says.
If you look at the first version, it's the first be it resolved clause and the last be it resolved clause is what I would suggest.
And also the second last view result.
Yes, yeah, there's the duplication there.
Pick whichever.
But if you look at the first and the last be it resolved on the first one, that's what I would suggest. Because this one combines those two, but I think it actually makes sense to keep them split.
Okay.
And I think that actual final be it therefore resolved is kind of the most powerful, it's the kind of most directive part, because it's like, we're
Right.
going to adopt a policy upon completion of the safety action plan. I mean, you could, if you really wanted to say, and set a year by which no people will die on our roads. I'm like, I don't know if you want to be specific about it, we can be like, that's when we're gonna say with what year we can do it.
Well, apparently we did it in 2024, right? So if we say 2024, we're done.
Well, don't want it to happen though. Ross, are you feeling like you have enough to give something to Chad to put on the council's agenda?
Yes, I am. And if anybody has other specific stuff, feel free to send it to me, and I will review it and put it in or not, and then you can lobby our council members to amend it if I don't put it in.
Hopefully the council will refer this to us.
Yes.
And
That's true.
I would encourage Rick, you to send your edits to Ross. Like Gabriella, I am not in favor of softening, but by all means, let him have that input. All right, anything else on that? All right, on to the future CIP items for this summer's adoption. And thank Ross for providing additional guidance on today's agenda. That really helped me. Ross, will you kick this off?
Yeah, so basically, after, it's in the wrong order in the packet because we amended the agenda. But basically, starting on sheet 25, we have the CIP items that are related to transportation and transit. Transit is not generally in the CIP because it's operational expense almost always. The two transit related things, I'm glad I saw that. There's a transit shuttle, which is number 3109. And then the BRT item, which I'm scrolling to find the number, but it's
3519.
3519.
Second
So those are the two transit items. The rest are, streets, paths, stuff like that. So the goal of this item is to get this commission's priorities for the CIP, kind of in like general project form, like I want this project to be moved up, I want this one to be moved back because it's not as much of a priority to me. And then take that to the mayor and and then it'll help align her priorities for the CIP. And if our priorities don't align, then she can say, hey, I think this commission should be working more on whatever it
some
is.
other thing.
And for context, for people that might not have been through a CIP process before, the current year, if it's in the first year, theoretically that all gets put into the budget automatically.
Yes.
Now, that's subject to change, the mayor usually calls it out in the letter, in her letter if she's changed anything from the CIP. But so that's a really important one, is if it's in that year. And then anything in the back 5 years is just like a placeholder. It's really not realistically, although we do, Ellers, our financial management company does put that into our projections for our 10-year management plan, but technically that last 5 years is kind of more theoretical. So anything back there is.
It's even less binding.
Yes, it's very nebulous. So anyway, that putting that stuff, things in the front 5 years or putting it is important. Putting it in the next year is very, very significant.
And I think not infrequently, projects remain in the back half for well over 5 years.
Yeah.
Herman Road, I'm looking your way.
Yes.
I took this page, which I thought was very useful,
Yes, so
And
that
I-
was what I was gonna get to next.
and I added on the priorities that were on the top. I like this page because it shows the year of the expenses. I did read all of the projects, and so I wrote down all the priorities, and I wrote down the ones that I would change. And I also noted whether I would advance or delay a project, and because they're important to me from terms of equity, I wrote down the projects that I felt that were invested in healthy neighborhood initiative areas. So, kick it back to Ross, but I think that, we want to know whether we want to raise or lower priorities and advance or delay projects, right?
Yeah, so basically that last page that Steve was just talking about is a summary page that we use in Public Works when we're adding to or moving stuff in the CIP each year. So basically, the yellow highlighted years are a construction year for that project. The street resurfacing program and the maintenance of arterials and the sidewalk and path maintenance and improvements, those are annual projects. We do construction every year on those. The other ones, why did my tablet freeze? Like Herman Road, Sain Road, both of the Sain roads that are in there. Those are generally, they will be design in year 1, property acquisition in year 2, if there is property acquisition, and then construction in year 3. So you'll see 2 smaller numbers and then the big construction number. So if you want to move a construction year, we also have to move the design and property acquisition. So
How do you want to organize our input for this, Ross?
I think it would be best to just go down the list. I can kind of start off with a project. If there's any general questions, I can answer those, and then we can kind of take a survey on if we should prioritize it or deprioritize it.
Is
Yeah.
2025, that's what's budgeted this year, so.
Correct.
Okay.
So I would suggest that we just give the name of the project or
Yeah.
any additional information just to identify it, and then if we have questions, just in the interest of time.
There's a lot on here. So parking lot resurfacing, if you guys want to talk about this, we
No.
can.
No change.
Skip it.
Transit shuttle is kind of a
It's a
weird
back 5
project.
years.
Yeah,
Project.
it's for the senior center, but I think we're going to end up changing that CIP item into some sort of a different project, so.
Yeah, I changed the priority to 5 future consideration. And I indicated delay because they're saying buy a van in 2026. I have long been an opponent of us getting into this business, and I think we should be investing in, all day, everyday transit service to the senior center and getting them into the paratransit region. So we tried to do that with the referendum, but let's try another way. So that I would downgrade this.
I agree. It's just not realistic, I don't think, even though it would be great.
McKee Road Path.
I made a note on that because I thought we had a McKee Road path, and it wasn't clear to me why we needed a new McKee Road path.
So this is the region between Seminole Highway and Fish Hatchery, and there's a sidewalk on the south and a partial sidewalk on the north. And there's a coming through that will destroy the sidewalk. And the question is whether we should rebuild it as a path at slightly more expense.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if the amount that was indicated was the delta between replacing the sidewalk and a path, or whether it is the full cost.
So yes, that is the delta between the sidewalk and the path, because the part of this project that is in the water CIP includes the cost to replace the sidewalk.
Okay. I had this as a important instead of a less important. And I see that it's near in and probably can't be advanced any
Right.
closer.
And really the water project is what's driving the date on this.
It is really not negotiable
Yeah.
as to when it is.
Okay.
Anybody else on that one?
Because that would make, if you put a path on that side, that would
It'll-
make the path go all the way down, right? Because there's a path once you get
Right.
north of,
Yes.
or past.
There's a
Seminole
path west
Highway.
of Seminole.
Yeah.
West of Seminole to Commerce Park. And then it turns into a 8-foot wide sidewalk that some people think is a bike facility.
Right.
On the east side, we have a path on the north side of the road. And I have an idea for our path that will connect McKee Farms Park up to the new BRT station, that's where the crosswalk should be at Yarmouth Green, at Trevorton Pike. And so I would have the path on the south side west of Trevorton Pike and on the north side east of Trevorton Pike, and have the crosswalk at Trevorton Pike, which is unfortunately not signalized, but it might be in a BRT world. Is that
Not that intersection.
not that?
But yeah, that's kind of outside this project.
Yep.
Okay, Traceway and Leopold bike and pedestrian path.
That's gonna run right in front of the hub, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to expand the scope of that, because the Bike Fitchburg proposal is for a path on the north side of Traceway and the south side of Post Road. And the Post Road path, which here is proposed to go from Leopold Way to Traceway, I would have go from the Cannonball path, which is only a little bit farther, to Post Road, which is lots farther, to Fish Hatchery Road, which is lots farther. So, and I would mark this as more important and advance it. And I note that it's a healthy neighborhoods
Yes.
area. But I would be very happy to have the CIP project, if it could be expanded in this scope, to only do that one segment, which I would be Cannonball Path, not Leopold Way, to Traceway initially.
So can someone explain where this is? I'm sorry,
Think of Leopold School right now. So this is a little stretch from Cannonball to Leopold. It's like one property. And then the hub.
So it would go down that side of the road?
And if we get this CIP project on the books with that expanded scope, then if Plesco does redevelopment of the garden apartments that are the Pines, the Fairways, then we can ask them to build that path.
Does Plesco still own that, or did they sell that?
Well, whoever the current owner is,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, basically this would be another like replaced sidewalk with.
Okay,
path
with a
in
path.
front.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk there now.
And there would also be some joint stuff with Madison, depending on which side of Post path went on, stuff like that.
Yeah, we adjusted the boundary so that all of Post Road is in Madison, not the center line.
Okay.
That's why they set the speed limit, they did the bike lanes, that kind of stuff.
Anything else on that? Okay, street resurfacing program, if you guys wanna argue for more money in that, that's really.
More money, please.
I did have a question on that. So we've got like, 1.2 to 1.6 million per year here budgeted, but for the past several years, we've been doing $2.5 or $3 million.
Forfeited.
Yeah, so how many more years worth of excess money do we have available
One more year, this year.
this year?
Yeah,
The
depending
bill
on so the past couple of years, I've been trying to spend all of the money
Yeah,
left, and it's misty kind of magic from Fish Hatchery Road. We basically had money left over that we had to spend on street resurfacing, otherwise it goes away. So we've been trying to spend it. But bids keep coming in lower than I anticipate, like by $500,000 or $1 million, so.
Keep up the good work.
Magic touch.
We are getting
magic
to
touch, yeah.
Yeah. So,
What a great
and
job.
there's also been ARPA money, so that's, separate ARPA project usually, but it's like $1 million extra a year that we've been doing.
But, I mean, just the amount of roads that we have, if we assume 30 to 35 years, we kind of need to do like 4 miles a year, right?
Yes, which is
In which
about
case,
this much that's in the CIP.
is it though? I mean, haven't we been doing like $500,000 per mile lately? This is like 3 miles worth?
Yeah, it's approximate.
I put a note in to my copy that said that this one and the sidewalks one are grossly underfunded. This is where we need way more money, along with transit. This is where we need a lobbyist in the legislature. Hopefully, Randy Udell is that lobbyist and will get us more state aid, because historically, in the last decade, the state has been collecting sales tax and income tax and not distributing it as they have, as the Constitution says. So we need more money, and so I think we've got to get more money, and as much money as we can get into these projects, we've got to spend it.
And one thing that we are attempting to do as a department is extend the life of our roads so we don't have to resurface them as often.
Street maintenance.
With maintenance, which is not in the CIP, because the CIP is only for capital, not for maintenance.
Which,
And the truck route thing would also help maybe.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
tell me about funding for the street maintenance program, because that was like $1 million this year?
Yeah, it's
past
like
year?
900.
Where did that money come from?
That's in the maintenance budget, so,
General operating.
yeah.
So it's up, okay.
Never
And that's-
much more about it than I do.
What did you-
I just used the number that Misty gives me.
But the thing with it was, the important thing about the way they move towards the budget is that we don't wanna use debt for any street
Right,
resurfacing. And before, the city had been using some debt because of the,
and sometimes a
but we've moved towards it.
40-year loan to pay off a 30-year road.
Yeah, it's in the general fund now, so like, we're not paying with it for debt, it's in the budget.
And the street maintenance, that for that $1 million, it bought like, what, 35 or 40 miles worth of crack filling and chip sealing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just in terms of like long-term planning, do we have any kind of data handy that says, here's, it says about how many miles, we're adding about 1.5 miles each year through development. I'm thinking if we're on a 30 to 35 year cycle, that puts us back in the early 90s. Do we have kind of a line chart that says, there's a big boom in like 93, so we know, 35 years plus 93, to kind of help us
What's the
budget?
demographic profile of our road age?
Yes.
So we don't necessarily have anything like that.
But you got the pacer
We
rate.
do pacer ratings every year where we drive every mile of our roads, rate them 1 to 10. It always ends up as a bell curve with, we have a few really bad roads. We have the new roads and the roads that we just redid on the top end. We usually have a little bit more of those than the really low end ones. But we always end up with a lot of 5s, 6s, and 7s, which are basically, you're gonna need to do maintenance or resurfacing on these in the next 5 years. So, yeah.
It's just, winters are brutal.
Yes.
Frost wedging.
Especially this one.
And do you keep track of how many total miles of each of the
Yes.
number 1 through 10?
Yep, so in my committee of the whole presentation that I gave, I don't know when, a while ago, I had some of that information.
Okay.
And I expect to be giving another committee of the whole presentation on that at some point. I've talked with Chad about doing that, you know,
Doing like
when we
once
get a
every
new
other
round of council members, yeah, I'll have an update on it.
You can try that on us if you like.
Anything else on street resurfacing?
Gotta do it.
Herman Road realignment. This is 2032 construction.
No change.
Okay. Sain Road, this is McCoy north to the city limit. So this is past what we're doing this year. And this is just a resurface, basically.
Yeah, I had a question on that. Back when Anna examined that, she felt that the wetlands filling that would require she thought that it would, paved shoulders would require wetland filling and that was verboten and therefore we would need a boardwalk. Has that thinking changed?
No, I would say the same.
Okay, so because the description does say paved shoulders, or it might say bike lanes, but I have notes throughout saying don't call them bike lanes if there's no curb. Or don't call them bike lanes if there's no curb, right? So I'm proposing to Chad another CIP project to run the boardwalk up the east side from the Post Road south to Cap City Trail. I love paved shoulders because they hold the road together and make it last longer, but I think that we should just adjust the description to the feasibility of actually paving the shoulders.
Fair enough.
Well, this is 3367, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the justification speaks about bike and ped. It says the 2017 Bike and Ped Plan identifies Sain Road as a primary bike route. This is the justification for this project.
Mm-hmm. That would be moved to the boardwalk over the E-way that would carry the bike and peds in my view.
So the whole justification for this needs to be rewritten to simply repave the road that exists.
The current width.
Yeah. Well, and
the road is really beat to hell too.
I've got a couple of questions on that. So this stretch is only about half a mile, and about, I don't know, a third of that, maybe do we own half and Madison the other half? Like from Nine Springs Creek?
It's not half and half.
There is a portion that's joint jurisdiction though.
Okay. Yeah, from Nine Springs Creek up is where the border looks to run along that road.
Yep.
And then, so it did list, so it's $500,000, which I just previously said we could do a mile for $500,000, but this is only half a mile and it's $1.5 million, which makes me think that the boardwalk might be included in this price.
So this price is with the paved shoulders widening into the
okay, so because of the wetland.
Yep, and I think this is a little bit over. This is going to be an expensive section of road to repave though. I think the base under this road is probably complete trash.
So in the spectrum of resurfacing to reconstruction, this is toward the reconstruction end of it.
Yeah. Yep.
I had one other idea that would be a vast expansion of scope. But
top priority.
Can we fill wetlands along this road to pave the shoulders if we do something to re-meander Nine Springs Creek? Because that will dramatically improve the quality of that wetland that was, obviously the Nine Springs Creek was channelized to drain so they could farm what's now the E-way. We could really do a lot to, you could get some beavers in there, but you could put some, you could re-meander that as a conservation project to mitigate the widening of the causeway.
That would be, we can certainly look into that. We can ask the DNR that question. That would be.
It'll be probably a quick no, and then we can move on. Okay.
Is this realistic for 2027?
For resurfacing, yeah, the boardwalk would be at a later date.
Resurfacing of the
Even
existing
with
structure.
base replacement?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't take
Okay, because it's not
much
curb
more
and gutter.
engineering, it's just more money.
So if it's just resurfacing, why wouldn't it just be part of 3319?
Because it started off as its own
Yes.
project, and if there's separate money set aside, I don't really wanna just delete it.
And if we, so for the normal street resurfacing, how much base replacement is done in that? I mean, would that?
I normally
be
estimate,
differentiated?
15%,
Okay,
of the road surface needing to be replaced at a depth of 1 foot. It usually ends up, we have 1 or 2 really, really bad roads that are like 50% replacement, and the rest are like
They're fine.
3%, so it all evens out. But without doing a bunch of soil borings beforehand, it's really, really difficult to tell. But in areas of wet soils, like we know we have at Cyane, the base is always worse.
so just for my education and probably everyone else's, just a 30-second overview on what that entails. So we mill off the surface and then there's gravel, and what do we do with that?
Yep, so basically there's, it's called excavation below subgrade, EBS, or undercut. So yeah, you mill off the asphalt and then you have the road base underneath, which is generally 3/4 inch gravel and then 1.25 inch gravel, about 6 inches of each, hopefully, if it was put in correctly. So generally with an excavator, we pull that off and stockpile it and save it. And then 1 foot under wherever that road base ends, we take out what is usually native soil that the road base was built on top of. We take that out to 1 foot deep, put in 3-inch breaker run, which is just big gravel, and then put the road base back on top of it and then pave over that. Sometimes we have to go deeper than that if the native soil is super muddy or something, but generally 1 foot below the base is good enough.
What I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, Ross, is that you drive a fully loaded quad axle dump truck
Yes.
down the base, down the native soil, and engineers walk behind it with spray paint. And when the dump truck rolls over it, the soil moves, they spray it there, and then they dig out more.
Exactly.
And the worst road ever was McKee, when it was washboard. Remember that? I had to go down way deep.
Yeah, and one of the main things with the proof roll is that moisture content in the soil and the base has to be at a certain percentage depending on the soil type. And if it's wetter than that, the soil just moves past each other, the little granules of soil. So if it's wet, it's gonna move way more, and you can't really build your road without putting a ton of gravel under it, so. And Cyane's in terrible shape, which means that water from rain is getting into the base as well and destroying it, so.
I love this discussion, but we should
I
try
was
to
gonna say,
I did ask for 30 seconds.
Sorry.
It's too interesting.
Okay, we're not gonna do anything with
The next-
McCoy to Lacey,
Yeah,
because that's cast in concrete.
Yep.
Traffic calming,
Sorry,
yeah,
that was 3368? You just
correct.
did that, I made a comment in there because it speaks about a roundabout at East Sherrill Parkway on Cyane Road.
that was the original intent for that project.
But that's what it says right now in the description. It says there's
Yeah.
a roundabout at East
That-
Yeah,
Sherrill
did you read all the edits?
The description is kind of, it's more of a log, so that, it's a write-only log of activity typically.
Yeah, so
Right,
you
but
gotta
there-
read all the way down, like the fish hatchery, South Fish Hatchery Road thing says expand to 4 lanes, and then later it says widening removed.
Yeah, Rick, this document how the updates are done doesn't
Yes.
make any sense.
Any
Why
didn't you just tell me that at the beginning?
It doesn't make sense, it's just difficult for humans to comprehend it as they're reading it.
Okay, but the $8 million is a current accurate figure in 2025.
Or something like $1 million under that though, right?
Yes, so basically, we estimated at $8 million last year, then we got bids this year, for about 7 million total between
This is
phase
these
two
are
and
the
phase
underbids that Ross is talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, but the grants / donations of 1.7 million are already secured?
Yes,
That's
That
the
was that
1.7
safety
million
grant.
you referenced earlier.
Okay, got it.
and that's included in that 8 million.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
So that's a good clarification just for kind of my own background here. If the bid comes in under and it's like a 90-10 state federal match or what have you, does the money we get, do we have to resettle that with county, state, feds, whoever it's with?
Yes.
Okay.
So in this case, I don't think we will be getting the entire $1.7 million of grant funding because the eligible expenses are going to be lower than whatever. It's not gonna work out where we
You
get
send them the
whole thing. It's
receipts
like
and they send us
1.65.
90% or 50% or whatever.
Okay, traffic calming program,
No comments.
okay?
Well, I guess the only comment I have is why don't we have an amount allocated yearly, some average?
Because I tried to put it in and it got taken out in the CIP process. I believe that was before it got to council, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, that should be an annual expense.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, well, pass it up.
Yeah.
Those PTCs.
Sidewalk maintenance and path improvements, I think we can kind of skip that one. Okay. Fitchrona, Lacey to Nesbit,
Walked in.
I'm sorry.
Lacey and Seminole intersection, this is, so
the
ignore the
electrical
title
line?
of this one, this is the path, along the O'Brien property, and then Hop House, and then, along Lacey, where there's a
right,
gap in the
yes.
path.
Okay, so this is the portion that the city's going to do and Newcomb will do the southern 3/4 of that or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah, I have an idea to expand the scope of this for later years because Lacey Road has a path all the way along it except from currently Wayfair to Community Center. And there's bike lanes there, but no path. And so I think it should be continuous.
Yeah, that's basically gonna be a new CIP item, I think, in this round.
Okay.
We've talked about that in public works.
That's perfect, because I'm gonna submit
one. Maintenance of arterials, we can kind of skip that, that's just additional funding for resurfacing. County Highway this is a county project,
Better known as Rimrock.
Yes, this is, Oregon Road to 12 and 18 is just Rimrock. County Highway D, which is Fish Hatchery reconstruction, Sparklestone to south of Burnland. This is another county project.
Yeah, I want to make a comment on that. This is the one that was, I fought all the years I was on the council and as mayor to keep it from being expanded to 4 lanes, and that's not in there anymore. The signalized intersection at Nobel and South Fish Hatchery is a need. Right now, that's a heavy pedestrian crossing area with all the development on Nobel and the older development to the west side of Fish Hatchery. And I think that this project should either be advanced or more likely get some kind of interim pedestrian facilities in there. Right now, we have not even a striped crosswalk. That was the philosophy to say, 40-mile-an-hour roads, you shouldn't stripe crosswalks because it would give pedestrians a false sense of safety, and they'll just kind of walk out there and the motorists will just blow them away. And that is not the Vision Zero way of thinking. So, high-vis crosswalk, the state law yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk sign, some signage that said PEDs ahead, that kind of stuff would be, I think, valuable there.
Yep, and we're gonna do a warrant study on this intersection for a signal. I think, so right now I know it's not technically warranted, so the county will not participate in the funding. But I think in a few years it will be with more development on Nobel.
The other thing is that, as I learned from reading Killed by a Traffic Engineer, warrants are only one way to get things put in, and sometimes people, engineers, agencies hide behind them. But you can say, engineering judgment says that this is an accident waiting to happen and I'm going to do something. And if we don't get county funding because of warrants, that's one thing, but I don't think we should wait.
Okay.
Well, and I mean, is there a chance we can lean on the high injury network to use that as a justification for this particular intersection?
Could be.
We can look at that. Fitcherona Road, this is down by Wayland. I forget the numbers, but it's in the description.
Yeah, I like the way that one was worded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
North of Wayland to south of Wayland.
Yeah, this appears to be paved bike lanes to nowhere. Do we have a strategy for getting the the paved shoulders to nowhere? Do we have a strategy to get the paved shoulders up to where we're doing the buffered bike lanes up to the north and down to MM?
So we would need to work with the town of Verona and probably fund the bike lane, fund those paved shoulders the next time they resurface that section. Because traditionally, they maintain the section in between this project and the North Fitcherona Road project.
What's the possibility that that area becomes City of Verona?
High in the next 10 years.
And then it would be more likely that it would be paid for rather than us paying for construction. And
probably, yes.
The regional plan back in the day said that we should maintain a rural buffer between Fitchburg and Verona, the urban parts of Fitchburg and Verona, so that it was clear you were going from one city to another, like it is the Badger Prairie Park between Verona and Madison. Verona was fine with that as long as the buffer was completely in Fitchburg. And of course, that's not a fair thing, but that was under a different Verona administration. And so from a land use planning standpoint, it was one of the reasons I argued that we should become a third-class city, because we would have 3-mile extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. I think that's a fight that we have to have with Verona to not annex the town all the way up to our border, or at least not, they could have a rural area and an urban service area like we do, although they're pretty unlikely to do that. But,
Should we get back?
yeah, back to this.
It's interesting, but.
Latitude 43 extension, I don't know that there's anything for this commission.
No, there is. So that's a healthy neighborhood area. The ridiculous cost of this is because of some stupid AT&T box that needs to be relocated. It's been delayed for years. It's absolutely critical. The residents in these neighborhoods, so the residential part on the west half, are very challenged, and one of the reasons is that it's so isolated. And it's isolated because you've got to go up the Monster Hill up to East Badger Road to get out of that neighborhood and up into Madison. I think that this is very important, and I would advance it and make it a 2. It's a huge quality of life thing for the people in that neighborhood not to be able to get out into the Novation side of the neighborhood.
It doesn't.
They have bike and ped access, but they don't have motor vehicle access.
Yeah, that's just what I was gonna say. It looks like there's a sidewalk on the north side there that does go through.
And this is there's ATC lines here.
I would-
That's part of what needs to get moved.
There was, originally when Metro Transit was diverting the bus into this neighborhood, because they had to fight to have that happen, the plan was always to, when that Latitude 43 was finished, to change the route so that it went down that road.
It would
I
be
don't-
a great improvement.
But I don't know if the neighborhood wants that or not. I don't know. It's just, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying as a point of information. That was always the plan. I don't know how that changes things, but I don't know if that changes things. But I really don't know I'd be interested to know what the neighborhood thinks of it. Do we really know what Southdale residents feel about it?
I was on the steering committee for the Southdale neighborhood plan that Fitchburg
Yeah.
wrote back in the, well, when I was on the council, I can't remember, it was probably around 2010. And so, we did public outreach, and that was the conclusion of the neighborhood plan, was that this connection was very important.
I'd just be interested in that, but
I
yeah,
can't
I'm fine
remember
with
the
it.
details.
There's
I'm fine
no
with it.
information in here as to where the extension is, what, it's from where to where.
It's to connect to
Literally that
Deer Valley
tiny-
Road.
Yep, just this little. Oh,
It's just that tiny section.
okay.
And there are ATC
Building
lines
and
there, but they are relatively cheap to move. It's the AT&T boxes that have like thousands of copper cables running through them. It's the thing that's right in the way.
I'd be fine with that change, or that suggestion, if that's possible.
Irish Lane from Fish Hatchery to South Saline.
This includes paved shoulders, as I
Yes.
recall.
Yep.
I don't know if the pavement can stand to wait that many years. I noted to advance it.
Yeah, so that's also waiting on water. Well, we are probably gonna have to run water main down that road, and we don't wanna redo it until we finish that, so.
So Hillside Heights would come into the urban service area and get water? What would the
I
water
don't
be
know
for?
enough about it to speak on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it pairs, they do a lot of pairing of those projects.
There's a bigger description in the water section of the CIP.
Okay.
Anything else on that?
Unless they're pumping stormwater out of the closed basin, could it be stormwater?
No.
Okay.
So there's 400,000 listed for right-of-way acquisition. It was my understanding that there was gonna need to be right-of-way acquisition for like the entire length of Irish Lane. Is this gonna cover it?
It's an estimate, but
I'm pleasantly surprised that it's that low, because I thought it was gonna be worse.
yeah, I mean, so we do have a fairly wide right of way there. It'll be stuff, like we can lessen the amount of right of way we need by like changing grading on ditches and just doing like temporary easements instead of like full right of way acquisition for all the grading we need to do. So. Okay, Southdale Bike and Pedestrian Connection.
I think this one would be something I'd want to move up a little bit. We've talked about, Rimrock being pretty dangerous, and, I bike that stretch, even with the nice wide shoulders and bike lanes that are in there now, it still feels like it's when people are rushing to work, I wish, it was a little bit slower in there, but, that's outside of our control. But we also have a neighborhood that's really disconnected from the rest of the city. And we'll get to it a little bit later here, the bike underpass. But right now that goes to kind of nowhere on one side, unless, like I said, I'll save that one for that item here. But I would think this would be more of a priority, even being, understanding the grant that is helping with the bike underpass. It seems like we'd be connecting parts of the city that already have people in them with the existing trail, whereas, for example, with the bike underpass, we'd be connecting a dead end path to
Another
fill
dead
lot.
end
Yeah. And my I guess I'm already down this rabbit hole. My concern is even with the grant funding, if we build this bike underpass. I don't wanna see it sit there like what we have in Uptown where we have the Golden Gate Pass Bridge that was, and some of the infrastructure there that was built in 2011, 12, 13, somewhere in that range, and sit there empty for 10 years as we sit here and wait for Nine Springs Hill or whatever it's gonna be called in 2 years, and then when that plan backs out, it sits there, it sits empty for 10 years.
So for both of these projects, some of the reasoning on the dates is for grant purposes. I've applied for a grant for the Southdale Bike and Pedestrian Connection, and that was the year that
It could be
we felt
granted.
like we could get funding for it.
Okay.
So that's at least part of it.
I note that's an H&I neighborhood, and I also made a note that I'd like that advanced.
So my note on 3509 Southdale Bike Connection was that I felt it needed a better description because I could not figure out exactly where this path would travel. It's from some neighborhood area to the Capital City Trail, but as far as exactly where it would go, and maybe that's not yet defined.
So when I wrote this, it wasn't. I've since written the grant for it.
Okay.
It's along MM, basically.
Okay,
So basically it's from East Clayton up along MM to like Anderburg and Englehart?
Yes, correct.
I noticed that on a couple of these, there was a little thumbnail map.
Mhm.
And that would be, for me anyway, it would be helpful on this one.
So we have a CIP GIS site that I can send out a link to that has all that stuff.
Yeah.
Bryant. Yeah, Bryant Road.
Next year.
No change?
Yeah, we're kind of moving on that.
Yeah.
Is that still considered a road?
Yes, unfortunately.
We're gonna make it into a complete green street.
Wow.
Prairie plants in the median.
Park some green cars and that'll be
I
about
don't
it.
know.
Anton.
Yeah, Anton Drive roundabout and sidewalk. This is TID stuff.
So this one, I made a note that I wanted a map because it was very unclear. I do note it's healthy neighborhood and I think it's important, not less important. And I want to get it on the books again for 3 fountains to redevelop, all end-of-life buildings. I want them to build a path from the existing path at the Williamsburg Way roundabout down their side of the street. I think you're talking about putting a sidewalk. No, there is a sidewalk on that side of the street. And you're
Yes.
talking about building a sidewalk down the east side of the street.
Correct. So I forget off the top of my head which TID this is.
Yep.
I can't really
Some TID.
know. But in that TID plan, there's much more detail.
Oh, okay. And then the part of King James Way has partial sidewalks through the bi-level and multi-level part. Are you talking about King James Way down by the lot that's a school lot, south of Fitzrona? Or are you?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that was not clear from the description, but when I poured over the map, that's what I came up with.
Yeah. Yep. That's all. There's better maps in there.
That's a healthy neighborhoods area,
Um,
and I think it should be a 3.
MM bike and pedestrian underpass.
Locked in.
Yeah. Height Farm, Lacey to 14.
Pronounced hate.
Height Farm.
I think that I put a lot of these that I'd like to advance, and I thought that one would be a good chance to delay, not because of no need, but I think the developers will be providing the sidewalks and/or multi-use path along the road as they develop through there, right?
Yes.
So does it need to be in a CIP project for us? Or just a neighborhood plan?
Maybe not. It might be able to be moved to just like a resurfacing, and then we could move it up. But that road is in bad shape.
Oh, yeah, I biked it.
This is a little easier though, cause it's TID funded, it's not,
And this will be,
it's not,
this will be urban section then, right?
I believe so, yes.
This is full reconstruction, right? I mean,
If it's changed to an urban section, it has to be.
Yeah.
So will there be speed limit reductions and
Yes, we've already
curb
looked,
and gutter and all that stuff?
yep, we've already looked at speed limit reductions.
So it'll be like Lacey.
Yeah, our plan is just to kind of, as it develops, move the
Lacey and
speed
South
sign
Side.
down the street, basically.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's not debt finance, so it's probably fine, it's TID borrowing.
I think that's right.
So because of that, it doesn't really make, you don't really have to delay it, because it's not gonna.
Giving away
cut
future
in-
tax revenue.
Yeah, but it's not gonna cut into any of the other budgets, I guess is the point.
Maloney Drive reconstruction,
Needed.
yeah.
Healthy neighborhoods area.
Is that,
How much will Olive Tree contribute to
I was
this?
gonna ask about that.
So they will be assessed for the curb and gutter on their side of the road. And they are putting in, I can't remember if it's, I think it's sidewalk right now. But I think you have comments on that.
Yeah, for the commissioners, I submitted comments from Bike Fitchburg to request a couple of things like a repair stand and bike parking in one other location. But the main ask was to run a multi-use path up Rimrock Road, because there's a multi-use path farther north that connects Moreland to the schools. And of course, we're gonna build a multi-use path farther to the south. And so I quote in my comments our long history of putting in these things piecemeal and then connecting them together down the road like we have done in Lacey and like we're currently doing on Seminole. BRT we've already talked about.
Okay.
Sorry, just a clarification, Maloney Drive, oh, okay, so there's a different road also in Fitchburg called Maloney Trail, right?
Oh,
Could be.
And, okay, so now I see the right one. I found Maloney Trail and it didn't seem to be related.
It didn't.
oh, it's in Greenfield, I knew that. Yeah, and if it's in Greenfield, I don't wanna touch it in CIP.
So I'm working on a couple of other CIP things to submit into the process. One of them is for a quiet zone from McCoy Road to the Irish Lane eventually, but at a minimum down to Lacey. And this takes a consultant typically to push these things through. And it also requires safety measures to literally prevent people from getting around gates. So you've seen these, they've already installed at Lacey and at Central Park Place. And
What is it called?
Quiet zone for the
quiet
railroad.
zone. So the railroad, the trains don't have to blow their horns on their way through.
Oh, got it.
And what it takes is road improvements to make that work. I'm going to put in one for, and these will be future consideration priority, number 5. Well, not maybe, Oregon Rotary Trail connected from Fish Hatchery Road over to Purcell Road. That requires condemnation of some land from an unwilling seller, and so we can't do that by statute right now. A off-road path, bike and pedestrian path between Syene at Aurora down to the village of Oregon with possible various routes, and then the Syene Road boardwalk along the east side of the road we were talking about across the E-Way. So I've got some more, but these are the higher priority ones that I'm going to try to get in on this cycle. Chad Breckland's invited me to submit them for consideration by staff and then eventually council if staff doesn't immediately ditch them.
Any other comments from anybody else?
Great work. Anything else that that you think is gonna be added this year, that you anticipate? There's a lot of things coming off the list this year,
Yeah.
which is kinda crazy.
I think we might find some stuff in the back 5, but if all of the trails that Steve just mentioned go in, then there'll be less room for that, so.
Yeah, these are basically, if you get something in the CIP, I've learned, then staff can work on it. If it's not in the CIP, staff are not going to talk to you about it because they got lots of things to do. And the goal here is to try to get one or more projects shovel ready so that when the next time the DOT has $44 million of TAP redistribution money, we can be one of the recipients. So this is at the beginning of a long process. And we don't really expect staff to go out and do this kind of stuff, but if we can get a Reconnecting Communities grant or something like that for a feasibility study for one of these things and a consultant could do that, that'd be great.
I'll make a motion to defer the transit plan update to the next meeting.
Second.
I think that's a very popular idea. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that deferral to our next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That will make it a future agenda item. Any other future agenda items that people?
I'm curious if there's learnings that we could benefit from the City of Madison's change to the bike path crossing West Washington. And I'd like to not discuss it now, but just know if there was something that we could learn from what the City of Madison is doing in changing that bike crossing.
We built a bridge where we had a similar situation, Badger at McKee. They keep making it permanent because of the success. Did you hear about the RRFB result?
Yes.
That there are more accidents per year
Yes.
after?
Well, that's why I thought it was, because
Yeah.
I think that we kind of assume that an RRFB is the answer to every crossing, and apparently it's not. In some
Well,
cases, it's worse.
It's a yellow light. If it was a solid red light, I think it would be effective. But because it's a blinking yellow, it's really not.
Isn't that what an RRFB is?
A blinking yellow, right.
Yeah. The next step up is called a hybrid pedestrian
All right, we're getting
beacon
into discussion.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
hawk.
We're getting into discussion.
We are, okay, future agenda item. Another future agenda item is I would like to report, Ross, on my learnings at the Quiet Zone webinar today. About, again, huge quality of life improvement if the train whistles don't blow on the way through your urban neighborhood. And so I'd like to talk about that. Any other future? Okay, announcements. We will be meeting again next Thursday, on Thursday, March 13th. And I do want to alert you to, there will be an interesting announcement from Bike Fitchburg on next Wednesday, a media release related to bicycle-friendly businesses. And any other announcements?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? We are adjourned.
Mike.